But yeah, the first, when the pandemic hit, I was at a workshop the Wednesday before, and then it hit that Thursday. And then the next Wednesday, they phoned me up and they said, "Can you do online?" I'm going, "Online?"
For all of you who are online,
All right,
we'll
I
be
guess
starting
I'm learning
momentarily. There's just a
something
few more
new
people
here.
coming through the door, so we'll be waiting for them to grab a seat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, in a heck of a hurry. So my hubby zips out and he gets the last of the webcams in Calgary, basically, and had me all set up. And yeah. I still have my little office studio thing set up. Yeah. Well, I still do the occasional one, So, and it serves a function to be online. So. Oh yeah. That's nice. Yep. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, instead of people having to drive great distances. Yeah. Oh, I need my notes. So tonight, guys, I will be using notes a little bit because this is a journey for me. I am not an expert, so. Hey.
I've got no excuses.
I just figured you were going to stay online. Yeah.
Take this off, and me and Sue can.
There we go. Yeah, you're going to be mic'd up.
Do you want the microphone? So they can see us in this area. Say hello, online people.
Nice. I give you more fun. No idea.
Well, I didn't know I was doing this either, so
This is great. We've got a few more people coming in, so we'll just
yeah.
Everyone at home in their pajamas can have some more time to get your coffee.
And they probably all got wine in their hands. I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I'm going to get out and about. And that is the flip, getting out and about. It is. Besides, we're only supposed to have 2 glasses of wine a week anyway, so you don't want to squander it on this.
True.
We asked the Okotoks town and the club are paying for you jointly.
Oh, cool.
So I have paid Ginny.
Okay.
So the town will pay.
Sounds like a plan, Stan. Whatever.
Giving people to just
checks confuse the. Oh yeah, no, that works. Whatever.
Yeah, it keeps everybody
straight.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That works wonderfully. That's great.
Okay, I think we can get started.
Okay, perfect. You go first.
So I'll just hold this up for
you just want me for moral support, you know what I mean?
Oh, so do you. Come on. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to one of our fun Okotoks Garden Club and Town of Okotoks Green Living event joint events.
Yeah, we're the double act, right? Ginny and
We are.
Susan, right?
We are. Yeah, so thanks for coming out. We're excited to have Janet Melrose here today to talk about mushrooms. I'm excited to hear all of the things that you're going to talk about with that subject. Yeah, and I just wanted to say too, I always have to put in my plugs, and you can put in your plugs too for your thing, but we're doing a vegetable gardening on the 22nd. So we're doing a workshop on that. We're bringing in Krista Green from Zone 3 Gardening. She's out in Turner Valley, Diamond Valley now, I should say.
Valley,
It's true. Yeah, so that should be fun. It's going to be the same online or in person. You pick how you want to come. So, all good. February 22nd. It's a Wednesday evening at 7. Yeah.
So anybody who's a garden club member or is on our email list, you'll get all of that sent through me anyway, because I was just about to send another one out to everybody. So for those of you who are not garden club members, it's very nice to see you. The way we do this, the garden club members choose various topics, and if they coincide with the goals of Ginny's department, the town of Okotoks, then we often decide to do them together, which invites the whole of Okotoks to join in. So if anybody though wants information from the garden club, you just have to send me an email. I don't try and send too many to torment people, but that way you would know what we were doing, what was coming up, and there's no pressure on you to join. We have another joint session next month, which is tomato growing, which is by my husband, and then April, we're hoping that one that we lost last month, there's a tongue twister, that we will be able to do that one in April. That was lawn alternatives, where we all get rid of the grass and we have other easy care things instead. So.
And what's your email?
Oh, don't ask me that.
Isn't it Okotoks Garden Club?
@gmail.com, something like that.
Something like that.
Or you can
Don't send emails.
It's okay.
Frances probably has little slips of paper up there. There we go. Frances, thank you. There we go. I knew she would not let me down.
And for those of you online, right, Okotoks Garden Club @gmail.com. Oh, gardening.
Gardening. Yeah.
So if we can totally confuse you, just email sustainability@okotoks.ca and you're good. Right. Okay, we'll let Janet take over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Super. So full confession, this is a journey for me. I am not an expert in fungi and mushrooms at all. I am an avid learner, okay? And part of the way I like to learn is I do a ton of research. So when Sue emailed me, I said, sure, because that's a heck of a way to learn. And of course, I have dabbled. I have grown mushrooms at home, and I've taken courses as well. And it is a learning journey. It's just like plants, fungi are a learning. We don't instinctively understand them. We don't instinctively do the right thing all of the time. But what I have been absorbed in fungi for quite a number of years. I started just photographing them in the forests and just gradually got more and more interested in them instead of just the plants that I would see. And literally have started to do an awful lot of reading. And the more I read, the more I get fascinated. And then I got in, well, I was already into soil, and then you start connecting dots, and it's literally a lot of fun. So the adage, of course, is that fungi are fun guys, right? Got to get that one out of the way. But I call fungi threads of life, because fungi are literally the threads that bind us all together. It's sort of Star Warsy, the Force binds us all together. Well, we have fungi binding us all together. Here's my little clicker. Okay. And I give you due warning. I don't want them to see me. They can hear my voice. Good. All right. And this picture here, I saw this at Emerald Lake just last fall, and I just adored this poster. And it says that it's from the Pacific Northwest, the mushrooms, but these species actually are also Canadian, Albertan as well, not necessarily just BC-ish. But I absolutely adored the print by that lady. All right, so let's find out. So Alice in Wonderland, right? Curiouser and curiouser. And yes, literally fungi, they're everywhere. We breathe them, they're on our skin, they're in our soil, they're in the air, they're our food, they're everything. And we know so little about them. It's absolutely astonishing just how much we don't know about them. Yet we do fear them. So fungi, they've been around about 1 billion years. Okay, long before us. They are more vital to life on Earth than anything else. 90% of them we don't know about. We haven't identified them. We have no clue. And they are capable of breaking down plastic. They could solve our plastic problem, so we just have to harness them. However, a few bad apples or mushrooms have given us a lot of fear about mushrooms. So this guy here is the bad guy, the poster child bad guy. But not all fungi are, of course, are poisonous to us. They have some wonderful names. Destroying angel, yes, bleeding tooth, dead man's fingers. So if you come across one of those guys, we have fear built into us, just like the spiders. We're scared of spiders, and yet they have that vital aspect in our world. But they can also be called eyelash cup. Okay. They can be called dog's nose fungus. Okay. And there are some that are bad. Absolutely. The bats, of course, with the white nose bat fungus. But we don't need, at the moment, to worry about fungus turning us into zombies. Everybody was talking about this fungus zombie thing, and I don't watch TV, so I'm the last person to know, So The Last of Us, it's called, yes. Yes, there is, and there is actually a fungus, and many fungus in the cordyceps family that can infest or infect insects. In fact, there's one that's known to infect an ant, and the ant gets all zombied-like, climbs up to the top of the trees, and then flings itself off the tree. Okay, and then, of course, it lands splat, and then all of the spores of the fungus disappear into the air. Very, very clever. So, yes, there is the possibility somewhere in whatever time that we could turn into fungus zombies, but so far I'm not too concerned. But yes, fungus can be pathogens just as like anything else can be a pathogen, right? So with we're scared of snakes, we're scared of spiders, we're scared of all sorts of things. But just like everything else, if we are respectful, then they will respect us. So going into that, the roles of fungi, because we tend to think of fungi just in very circumscribed little pathways. But really, fungi, they are an important part of soil diversity, and this is where I started to get fascinated with them. They can help tackle our global challenges. We were just talking just before we started, but what can we do? What is the hope for us in terms of climate change? It's not. Margaret Atwood's saying isn't climate change, it's change, yes. And quite honestly, because fungi are closely linked to both carbon sequestration, the nutrient cycle, soil building, all of that kind of stuff, they have an important role to play for us. They are a major decomposer. That's one of their biggest things, is that they're decomposers. If we didn't have fungi, the world would be full of rotting stuff. So they break down wood, they decompose all sorts of plant matter, people, also, animals, everything. So they are the major decomposers. They are also carbon sequesters. So when you have fungi involved in the situation, what happens is, together with the plants, they're able to take a hold of carbon dioxide, and they have this major role of sequestering carbon in our soils. So we talk about trees doing a lot of the sequestration, but a lot of it is actually our soil. So if we build our soil along with our fungi friends, then we will be doing a lot to that. They are found in the diets of our world. Beer, 9000 BC is the first evidence that man was making beer out of the yeasts that are fungi. It's always alcohol-based, isn't it? It's fermentation. And, you know, talking fermentation, a lot of the different fermentation that we do is all about fungi and the microbes, absolutely. We can eat them. They have much more protein than some of our meats that we do. They're in cheese, they're in yogurt, all sorts of things. They're also in our medicines as well. And I'm not talking the ones that make us high, though if we're talking the drug scene in the 1960s, LSD, right? Was that the 60s or the 70s? 60s, it was the 60s, okay. They are. Oh yeah, but it's basically, take the up. Yeah, exactly. Take a trip and it's good this time. Okay, all right. But the other thing is, I'm like I said, I'm reading my notes because I'm still learning, all right? Okay, so what we want to know is literally, just like everything else, there are massive functions for the fungi in our world. And I think the more we learn them, the more we respect them, the more that we will protect them. And one of the biggest things that just blew me away recently is everybody talks about Roundup. And Roundup is not systemic. It won't hurt us, etc. Who knows about that one? But Roundup kills the fungi in our soil. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, and in our gut, of course, too. So, you know, that one statement to me opened up my eyes, and I said, hey, you know, here's another reason that we don't use synthetic pesticides. But we keep focusing on plants, we keep focusing on animals, but we don't focus on the fungi. Oh, the fungi kingdom. We know of 148,000 species as of 2020. Approximately 2,000 new species are found every year. There is an estimation that there's about 3 million, but like I said, 90% of those we don't know. That kind of makes us go, oh, that's kind of cool, isn't it? Until very recently, they were classified as plants. But they're not. They were their own. And 1969 is when they started saying, no, these guys are their own separate kingdom. So now it's flora, fauna, and fungi. So if we're talking about the three groups, just like right plant, right place, right purpose, it used to be just right plant, right place. It's also the purpose. They include our yeasts, of course. They include our mildews, the smots. They even include powdery mildew for those of us who know all too well about it. And sometimes we have fungi-like organisms that belong in their own kingdom that we consider to be fungus because they're like fungi, but they're really not. So if you see a water mold or a slime mold, those really aren't fungi. They are eukaryotic organisms. Okay, so what the heck is that, you say? I didn't know what it was. It means that our cells are composed and we have nuclei in our cells. And that automatically separates them from even the other kingdoms, the micro kingdoms. And we have organelles and they have defined nuclei. And so once again, one of the reasons why they got split out from the plant kingdom is because they do not produce chlorophyll. All plants, or 99% of the plants, produce chlorophyll. They are also, oh, by the way, if you study fungi, it's mycology, okay? So their cell walls contain chitin, just like lobsters, which is kind of cool. All right. Oh, they are spore-bearing as opposed to seed-bearing. And this is our kingdoms. So basically we start off with these dudes all down here, but then we've got these ones, and these are called the higher kingdoms. And in terms of evolution, if I look at an evolutionary scale, it's plants, then animals and fungi almost simultaneously started to appear. Though fungi in relation to plants, one of the reasons why we have land plants is because of the role of fungi. Literally, the rootless plants would be washed onto the shore, and they couldn't root themselves, they couldn't absorb nutrients. It was the fungi themselves that did some of the work with them. So we have all of these very, very specialized and symbiotic relationships between the kingdoms. So, and I love this saying by Linnaeus, plants grow and live, animals grow, live, and feel. Well, that was before they moved fungi out of plants into animals. So what? Well, I know. Don't bear in mind that he was 1700. Okay? No, not yet. He was being very, very black and white. Yes. Here we go with the fungi kingdom. And the reason why I went this route for us is I wanted us to get a feeling for the kingdom itself and how it relates. And so I'm sort of diving down sort of skinnier and skinnier as we go. And so the word fungus comes from the Greek. Lots of words come from the Greek. Spongus, so sponge-like and it turned into fungus. And what we're looking at in terms of the fungi is there are the four major groups with a common ancestor at the bottom. I cannot pronounce the Latin. So we have this group here, who they figure were the first to branch off from that common ancestor. So these ones are the water molds. And then we have the zygotomycota, and they're our bread molds. So when your bread turns green, that's them. Okay. So these guys are the more primitive ones. Then at some point in time, we got two new ones, and they are more related to themselves than the other two. And so we have the Basidiomycota, and I'm mispronouncing it. This is where most of our mushrooms are in this particular division. And then we have the Ascomycota, and there are yeasts and things like that. So when we talk fungi and mushrooms, when we talk mushrooms, we're just talking about this one division within fungi. Oh, all mushrooms are fungi, but not all fungi are mushrooms. Okay, so my title, Fungi and Mushrooms, is a little bit fuzzy, isn't it? Because literally not all fungi are mushrooms. So this guy here, this side here is our molds, and these guys are our mushrooms, but they have a common life cycle. So typically what happens is we have a mature fruiting body, and that guy spreads all the spores everywhere. And then they land on something, and it germinates, right? And then they grow the mycelium into something that is roughly their adult form. What is going to generate all of this activities is the right environmental conditions. So if it's our bread, it's our nice loaf of bread that did not come from Wonder Bread. Okay. And it's in a nice little plastic bag so that it doesn't go hard, and it's moist, and it's on our kitchen counters, so it's warm. And lo and behold, we have the right environmental conditions for the growth of the spores. And you get it turns green. Who here makes their own bread now? A lot of us. Yeah, I do too. Well, have you noticed the fact that the bread that you make will start producing mold approximately 3 or 4 days in? All right. For those of us where the loaf lasts a little longer. By the way, it's not me that makes the bread, it's my hubby. So yeah, he's a great bread maker. But even the store-bought that is not Wonder Bread usually will take longer because they have different preservatives, whereas the bread we make does not. So mushrooms need the same sort of environmental conditions for all of this activity to happen. Otherwise, just like seeds, they just sit there. And we know all about seeds just sitting there. And when the right environmental conditions come, all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of lamb's quarters or chickweed or dandelions or all sorts of things popping up everywhere. So when we talk about mushrooms and toadstools, what's the difference? Interesting, isn't it?
Eat mushrooms, you eat toast.
Bingo. There's no scientific difference between them. We literally, and one of the reasons why they call them toadstools, they think, is because toads could eat them and not die. So, but they are literally the same thing. So if you see something, you go, oh, that's ugly, it's a toadstool. It may be edible. So we should actually lose the word toadstool. So the mushroom literally is our reproductive structures up here, the hyphae, and then underneath is the myceliums. So, oh, the other reason why they think that toadstools are called toadstools because they sit on them, yes, but flies can be attracted to them, and then the toads and the frogs come and eat the flies from the toadstools. That's another reason. So we call the mushrooms as a generic term, but we also call mushrooms boletes. We call them puffballs, we call them stinkhorns, morels, if we like to, if they deviate from this standard mushroom structure, which is typically this. And we call mushrooms that because of the button mushroom, you know, the stuff that we see in the stores all the time, right? And those ones, that one is the agaricus, thank you, by Sporus. And you know more about this than I do.
I have a wonderful mushroom book.
Okay, which one do you have?
Something after the rain.
Okay,
Pocket manual.
cool. Cool. I've been collecting mushroom books. Okay, so typically what we have in a mushroom is a stipe, which is what we call our stem. We have the cap, which is called a pilus in botanical terms. Typically mushrooms will have gills under here, and those are called lamiae. Okay, and the underscand. Okay. So in terms of morphology, this is just literally what we're talking about is this cap, the gills. Often they'll have a ring around it and the vulva at the bottom here. And here's our stalk as well. Sometimes they have a veil, and the veil actually can either be right over top or it can be a partial veil. So if you see mushrooms that sort of look like a bride in her fancy veil, that literally is, it's a veil. And they're all designed to be protective. And under the ground, of course, we've got the thallus or the mycelium. Okay, all of which is important when we start getting into to cultivating them. There are three groups of mushrooms that we need to concern ourselves with. So we have the mycorrhizal, and it's quite interesting. The study of mycorrhiza is almost a study in of itself. When they first started to discover and think about it and work with it about 200 odd years ago, they figured just a few species of plants would have this symbiotic relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi. And now it's more like who doesn't? And oddly enough, the Brassica family does not have a relationship. So if you are cultivating broccoli, you don't need mycorrhizal fungi. There's a few different genuses and families that don't. So typically the mycorrhizal fungi, these are the ones that we collect in the wild. Trying to grow them yourselves is almost impossible for us to replicate the conditions for them to do that. So the chanterelles, the morels, and the truffles. Truffles, of course, are more of a European thing, but we certainly see more of the morels and the chanterelles, and I have seen them in the wild. And it's very exciting. We also have the parasitic ones, and the parasitic ones are things like the chagas, the cordyceps. I changed that, there's no T there. And the lobster mushrooms. Those ones, once again, they have the relationship with the living plant, often trees as opposed to other types of plants. And we usually collect those in the wild because, once again, trying to replicate those conditions either indoors or in our own gardens is very, very difficult. If you ever get a chance to go up to a Water Valley area, Fungi aikido or Kyoto fungi, they have they'll do a tour of their property where they're growing all these mushrooms, and they have a massive size, like we're talking acres, where they're all set up. So can we do this in our average urban backyard? Typically not. But then most of the cultivated ones are the ones that digest the dying or the dead organic matter. So it sounds kind of gruesome, doesn't it? We're eating mushrooms that have been decaying other plant matter. However, that is the way we are, and we have our cultivated mushrooms, such as the button mushrooms, the shiitakes, the lion's manes, the oysters, all those guys. Those are the ones that typically we get into when we're doing cultivation. Okay. So when we're talking fungi in the wild, once again, those 148,000 species, and so since 2020, we've got an extra 6,000, so we're not talking 154,000. When you see fungi in the wild, you have to assume that 50% of them are inedible. So inedible means that they would be really rough and tough to chew. They would taste kind of either bland or nothing, or they would not be appetizing to us. They're not going to kill us. They're not going to make us sick. They're just not something that we'd care to use. We have to assume that 25% are not palatable. So meaning that we could eat them, but they might cause us a digestive issue, that type of stuff. 20% is going to make us sick to our stomachs, okay, but it's not going to make us call the undertaker. 4% of those are truly tasty. They're the ones we want, on our plates. 1% is going to kill us, like right now. Do we wish to take the chance? So this guy looks kind of like a button mushroom, doesn't he? He's destroying angel. Named very appropriately, and thank heavens he's not found in North America. However, we have to assume if we are looking at fungi in the wild that they are not something that we should be consuming or using for medicines, etc., etc. So how are we going to even get into the point of wanting to collect our fungi in the wild? And I have identified, and I believe I've identified correctly, the morels, and I've seen the chicken in the woods, and I've seen a number of others. Some of them, there's one that's called witch is something that looks like little blobs of orange jelly, and that's apparently edible. I don't want it on my plate. Okay, so of the species in Alberta, so I'm narrowing this down, there's about 80%, there's about 80 edible species. And I do use the albertamushrooms.ca, and I also use Northern Bushcraft as a reference. However, there are at least 20 deadly ones. So 25% of the mushrooms that we might see are going to kill us off. I don't think we want to make sure that we know exactly what it is if we're going to pick them. So this is a mushroom that I photographed. It's on the forest floor. I sort of think it might be a bolete. Okay, it's got the appearance of a bolete. I don't know. So he's still there. Okay. So my rule is unless I'm absolutely 120% sure, I will not even attempt to pick a mushroom. I'm more interested in them in their own environment anyway. I'm quite happy to grow indoors the ones that I know, or pick up the button mushrooms from the store. So the trick is, all of these guys, I've seen most of them in the wild. But if I'm taking along my little book, and this book, I'll show you a bunch of references later. I keep this guy with me when I'm out there. And this was written by Tom Cervenka. And it's a really handy guide. And I've seen quite a number of these guys in the forest, but I'm not 100%, because just like bees can look like wasps, and wasps can look like bees, and flies can look like this, they guys do the same thing. There is a morel and a false morel that unless you pick it and chop it in half, you will not know that whether it's a true morel or not. Okay, true morel would be hollow, whereas the false morel would be solid inside. Well, now I've destroyed the thing by picking it, so I'd rather just leave it behind. But what I have found, the advice is learn 1 or 2 really well, rather than trying to learn 20, because there's such minute differences in some of them that you really have to examine the gills, the stem, the veil, the ring, all that kind of stuff before you start getting positive IDs. And you have to learn how to do pore sprints as well. You need to know their smells, all that kind of stuff. Do learn from experts. So if you are going to learn mushrooms, and especially ones from the wild, go out with walks with experts. Because some folks that are experts in cultivating mushrooms indoors are not experts at IDing mushrooms outdoors, vice versa. And that, to me, is one of the best advices that I have. I'm just so fascinated with what they look like as opposed to wanting to eat them is my theory right now. So here's all of the ones that, well, no, not all of them. This is about, what, 10 or 12 of the 80. And you'll notice that often if they are edible, they have an animal name. Lobster, chicken of the woods, horse, deer, pig, hedgehogs. We tend to give them names that are fairly, I don't know, close to the animal world. It's interesting to know that fairy ring mushrooms are edible. So if you guys have got fairy rings in your garden, you can use the mushrooms if you wish to, which is kind of cool. However, make sure you positive ID them. And I have been finding, particularly when you bring in the mulch and put it on your pathways and gardens and stuff like that, some of the most incredible mushrooms pop up given the right conditions. Okay. So I'm going to get us now diving into us cultivating mushrooms themselves. So from our perspective, and we're looking just now at the saprophytic mushrooms, what we are looking at is the initial period where the spores are released. Okay, then they inoculate somewhere with others. They germinate. Then they start doing the mycelium expansion. They create what they call a hyphal knot, and they start creating this primordia formation, which then will turn into the fruiting and the mature fruit body, which is the mushroom that we see. One of the largest organisms on Earth, covering 17,000 hectares, is a mushroom. Okay, bigger than the blue whale.
Underground fungus,
It's
the largest organism?
Yeah. Didn't I say that? What did I say?
Mushroom.
Oh, no. Yeah, the fungus itself is underground. Yeah, not the fruiting body themselves. Yes, exactly. We used to get excited over the aspen groves that are all one mom and all the babies. This dwarfs them. So what we are learning is that we need to, when we're cultivating mushrooms themselves, we need to learn this cycle, because that gives us the ability to cultivate them properly. So when we're cultivating these mushrooms, they need a food source. Typically, we give them carbon, wood, often manure. Does anybody ever had mushrooms growing in manure? If they've had a manure pile on their property? Yeah, it's kind of fun, isn't it?
I used to work on a mushroom
Farm. Okay, yeah.
And Regina's horse stables were valuable.
Yes. Some of the tastiest mushrooms I've had are from a friend's manure pile, actually. No cultivation necessary, right? And actually, I think that's the key about cultivating mushrooms, is we really don't cultivate them. We don't grow them. All we do is provide them the right growing conditions. As per normal, we tend to make it a lot more complicated and a lot more mysterious than it actually is. So they need a carbon source. They need moisture. More precisely, they don't need moisture as in sitting in wet. They need humidity. Okay, Alberta. Okay, low humidity. Okie doke. All right, so not too wet, not too dry. We're kind of Goldilocks in this particular. We do not want our mycelium to dry out. Okay. They need oxygen, yay, okay, and they will, just like plants, breathe in the oxygen and breathe out the CO2. Actually, it's the other way around. They're more like human beings. We breathe in the oxygen and release the CO2. They need sunlight, but not bright, intense sunlight for the most part. Most of them prefer being in the shadows, dappled sunlight. I tried growing underneath a spruce tree, too dry, too dark. So I've moved my mushroom bed into underneath a more deciduous type of look. Okay. Temperature, a lot of them have different temperature ranges. All right. And what you will find mostly for the mushrooms is in the wild is that you'll see them more in the springtime. So whenever spring shows up to the end of June, you usually will not see mushrooms fruiting in July and August. Having said that, I've seen the most marvelous ones in July and August. And then a lot of them show up again in the fall. That's typically when they fruit. And that's because the temperatures are cooler in both in spring and fall. But they don't particularly like frost either. They're kind of delicate in that respect. So taking it now into a cultivation cycle, and we need to understand this, because what we do is we go to the garden centers or wherever and we say, I want a mushroom kit. And you get a little box. Okay, how did we get this box? What does this box contain, or how did it come into being? And so the folks that are doing cultivation, by the way, I don't buy the boxes from the garden stores. It's like amaryllis bulbs. I don't buy them from a box either. I buy the actual bulb, okay? So the source, when you have a mushroom kit grower or a growing kit grower, is literally a spore. So they're going back again to our cycle. They start off with these dudes. And so we just need a spore or a piece of mycelium. And literally, they bung it onto a petri dish. And they isolate it because they want to be sure what kind it is. And they grow it out in agar. So then we end up with a culture. Takes us back to biology 10, right? Okay. Then what they do is they place it onto usually grain, okay, and they sterilize the grain, they pasteurize the grain, so that this culture then will start to grow throughout and inoculate literally all of the grain inside. And it can be just in a glass jar. And now that's called a spawn. Okay, so now we've got our spawn. What are we going to do with it? Literally, the spawn now has consumed the food source within that glass jar. So now what they do is they take the spawn and they put it into the substrate. It could be your sawdust, it could be wood, it could be all sorts of things, and that becomes our grow kit. So literally, that's what our grow kit is. The growers that provide us these have done all of this, and all we end up having to do is this bit, the fruiting piece of this. So we take our kit and we now have to give it the growing conditions that are going to start to trigger the fruiting. Okay. Home. Too hot, too dry, too dark. Okay. That's always fun. So the environmental conditions, this, by the way, is the blue oyster. Environmental conditions that we are looking to have, and it does not matter if this is indoors or outdoors, is we want indirect sunlight. So here's our dappled shade. We want to have a temperature between 18 and 22 degrees. Oh, that our summers would be 18 to 22 degrees. Do you work in your garden? 22. And a nice gentle breeze, about 3 kilometers, clicks an hour. Yeah, okay. Okay. So do we ever get 18 to 20 degrees outdoors? Well, we do occasionally. Although actually mushrooms are fairly forgiving outdoors. After all, they grow in the wild. They want to have that humidity of 80 to 90%. Do we ever get it? No. So if we are going to grow them outdoors, we have to figure out ways to provide them that humidity they're going to need. If we're going to do it indoors, likewise, we need to give them that same humidity, and they need airflow. So we don't stick them in a box and close up the lid, but they need to have air. They don't need like grow, you know how we grow seeds and we give them shelves and we give them lights, bright lights, and we give them a fan and all that kind of stuff. They don't need quite as much as growing out seeds. All right, so indoors. So going back to our grow kit, what we typically will get is a substrate, or nutrified sawdust as they call it. It could be the hardwood pellets. It could be soy hull pellets, not so much common here. And they have already hydrated the pellets beforehand, and they have sterilized it. So what they've given us is this substrate that has been sterilized. They have inoculated that substrate with the grains of the spawn, and each valve will typically, this is what I usually see, is a nice little plastic bag with a one-way valve, so that there's a little bit of air coming in, not much, but a little bit of air, but it's not enough to trigger out that growing conditions. And typically the growers will keep the grow kits in conditions that will not be warm enough or not humidity enough for them to start triggering. Because last thing you want is a kit that's, you know, too much.
I'm intrigued by this plastic bag because I have a whole pile of empty coffee bags that have that little air in them, and I'm trying to figure out something to do to recycle them.
If you can sterilize them, then you could use them.
But do they have to be clear for the light to get through?
Yes, typically.
Darn it.
I know.
Coffee bags aren't.
Yeah. And the big trick with all of this is that all of these kits are created in conditions where you can't have a stray spore from somewhere else show up. Because don't forget that in our world, we've got spores everywhere, right? And one of the biggest fun things is you get your nice little grow kit and you grow it up and you get something that looks not quite what the picture said. So it's just like, you know, I get an amaryllis bulb and it's supposed to be red with green splotches and it's called Barbados. And I get a white one with green splotches. All right, what the heck are you? So same, doesn't matter with our amaryllis. I liked it anyway, but sterilized, the best grow kits are done in very sterile conditions to prevent that cross contamination. But that's it, okay? Does it cost $50? Don't know, but it's input, yeah. Often kits will cost you $50, especially in a retail operation, okay? I don't buy mine in a retail operation. I go local. So what we do is we bring our kit home. First thing, and we open up the bag. Well, no, we don't, the box if you brought it as a box. But if you just have the bag, and a local grower will just hand you the bag. Maybe it's in a plastic bag or a paper bag or something, but they'll just hand it to you. What you have to do is you have to inspect the bag to make sure that the mycelium has eaten all through the substrate. So what you want it is to look like this. So if you look at it and you can see more of the substrate brown than the white mycelium, then you have to wait till it propagates further because it's still consuming all through that food. And quite honestly, why would I bother fruiting if I've still got food to eat? So, and this sort of white stuff like this, that's called pinning, just because growing mushrooms has its own terminologies, just like everything else, right? So when you get you inspect it, everything looks wonderful. It's nice and white, and you can see the odd little brown thing, but that's about it. Then what you do is you expose it to oxygen. Now, the trick is, do you wish to have the whole darn thing grow and fruit at once? You end up with a bag that's just, okay, all right? Or do you want just a few? So if you want a whole bunch all at once, so you're going to have a great big dinner and you're going to use the whole thing, then what you do is you literally just cut off the top and expose the whole thing at the top. Or more usually, what we do is we just, with our X-Acto knife, is just cut X's in various spots in the bag. I tend to do 2 or 3 at a time. Some people will do up to 20. But I prefer to just do a couple at a time. That allows the more oxygen into it, and that's one of our first triggers. And then you put it in a spot where it will receive the indirect light. Do you need a grow light? Not necessarily if the location that you have in your home is got bright indirect light. So not in a south window where it's going to get super hot, but somewhere where it's nice. So your greenhouse might be the job. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms that you buy at the store, like Chinese mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
stuff that came out of the Rothschild Brothers mushroom farm, grown in the dark.
They are grown in the dark. I know, and they are grown on manures too. So yeah, they're a slightly different ball of wax. Okay, and in fact, you rarely will get a kit that's button mushrooms because it's grown on that type of substrate. Yeah, and yeah, yeah, and you don't want the smell either. Yeah, exactly. You can occasionally get the button mushroom stuff, but not generally speaking, and it's because of those specialized conditions. Yeah, so when we say that we're a mushroom or grow in the dark in the shit, yeah, Does everybody know what shit actually means? It's an acronym. Okay, ship high in transit. And the reason why is that they used to ship the manure in boats, okay, and they put it in the hold. And then mysteriously the boats would blow up, all the methane and stuff, right? So then they figured it out. So now they would only ship the in high, as in on the decks of the boat. So we've taken that acronym and made it to mean something else. English language is wonderful. Anyway, but no, you're quite right. The Money's mushrooms and all those guys, they're grown in the dark. It's interesting, isn't it? Every time we say, oh, it's this way, there's always, this is an example. Yeah.
And they have the same problems as everybody else. As a mushroom picker, I had to be taught, this is what we're looking at. That is not what we do here. You have to take that out because there'll be 5 or 6 different breeds of mushrooms in what they spore as just a button mushroom.
Exactly, contamination. Yeah, and manures, that type of mushroom species family, the capacity or the ability for cross-contamination because it's coming in that substrate, massive. So there you go, perfect example. All right, so then some people will regulate the airflow. For me, I just have a lid on I'll talk to you about the containers and stuff that I just lifted off every so often. You don't need a fan and things like that per se, just a little bit of airflow. So if you've got airflow in your house, whether it's the heating or the air conditioner or just having the windows open, that's enough airflow. And then you got to eat them. So for us, all we have to do is we inspect them, we open up to oxygen, we place them somewhere where we can give them lots of oxygen, indirect light, and some humidity, and then we eat them. Easy, right? Unless something goes wrong, because it's part of the kingdoms, right? It's alive. So fruiting chambers and gardening people love to make things very complicated, and they love to make things very expensive too, don't they? So a fruiting chamber is something where we grow indoors, and it's used to help us regulate the growth. That's all it is. So you can have DIYs, and you can have, as well, you can have store-bought. So this is a store-bought one. Very lovely, isn't it? I wonder how much it costs. It has its own moisture tank here and probably a mister to go in here. It's got a nice fancy lid. It looks so pristine and cute, doesn't it? All right. You can make your own using one of those little mini greenhouses if you want. You can use a plastic bag or you can use a laundry basket, which I use. So we can really go DIY, and I encourage you to go DIY. I would only get this if I was a super millionaire. Okay, I'm not a super millionaire. Okay, so first way to do this is what they call a humidity tent. It sounds very fancy, doesn't it? So what you do is you get this plastic bag, and you cut holes in it so that there's airflow. And they say about 10 holes, about 1.5 centimeters. Do not get a ruler. All you do is just punch a hole through them, okay? You place the kit itself on a nice plate or a dish or something, and you pour the water in here, and that's part of your humidity. And then you cover the kit, the plate with your bag, and that's it. So to control the environment, you're lifting the bag on and off, on and off, on and off, at least because you want to make sure the airflow is there and that the humidity is staying right. So yeah, you're doing a lot of don't go away to Hawaii, okay? You'll have a nice dried out bunch of nothing sitting on the counter, covered in fungus gnats probably. Okay. The other way is a little bit more upscale, and it's called a shotgun chamber. So that's this, whoops, that's a shotgun chamber. So all you need is a clear tote, Canadian Tire, approximately 80 liters, give or take, and a lid. You want perlite, lots of it actually. So, and you need to have a drill bit and some measuring tape and a spray bottle and water. I don't even use the measuring tape or the Sharpie. So what you do is you, on the side of your container, is you mark out holes, rows. So starting from about, don't start too close to the bottom because otherwise the perlite comes out, I learned. So approximately 2 inches to even 4 inches, you start and you basically put holes all the way around. So this is your oxygen flow, okay? And then you spread the perlite out and you really give it a good lot of water because perlite has the ability to absorb all that moisture. Nice to have perlite because perlite comes sterilized. Yep. Oh, perlite. Perlite. Do I have a perlite picture? Don't have a perlite picture. Perlite looks like tiny popcorn, and it's a garden amendment, freely available at garden centers. And what it does, its job in the soil is to absorb air and moisture and then release it out. So you often find it in potting soils. It's that little white stuff fleck throughout it. You want coarse as opposed to fine. So the bigger chunks, the better, okay, is what we're looking for. They have perlite with Miracle-Gro added to it?
Trying to find perlite that doesn't have fertilizer in it is actually really hard.
Seriously? Yeah. I get mine from a wholesaler. Crazy. The things we do. Okay. So no fertilizer. Okay. They did it to bump the price. Okay. So you spread the perlite over, give it a good chunk of water. Okay. Then what you do is you put in your grow kit, prepared with the holes cut where you want them to be, and then you stick it under. I have mine under a blue grow light because where I grow them is a little on the darker side, but if it's kind of light, no problem. And I lift the lid and spray the inside of the chamber. Try not to get it onto the mushrooms itself. At least twice a day, 3, 4, 5, 10, depends on how much time you've got on your hands. And make sure that the perlite doesn't dry out. Your grow kit should start to sprout and mature within, start to germinate within, or fruit rather, within 7 days. And often you will have mushrooms within 14.
Have you ever played with adding like the reptile?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's a good idea. Because yes, there's all sorts of variations on that theme. You don't have to go high tech, but anything that would do an automating misting thing would be a good idea. Because in our world, trying to keep that humidity up there is the biggest problem that we have. Okay. All right. We can grow them in buckets as well. So all you need for a bucket is one of those gallon containers from Dairy Queen or Home Depot or from a restaurant, where it's basically a food grade bucket. And what you're going to do, and then you have your substrate. So this is when you want to make your own grow kits. So what you're going to get for that is you get your bucket, you drill all the holes in it. You get your substrate, which is going to be your straw typically. and you're going to get hydrated lime so that you can pasteurize the straw and your cultivated spawn. Okay, and what you do is clean your bucket thoroughly and sterilize it. Do avoid bleach. Use isopropanol if better, because bleach is very bad for our environment. You drill the holes in, as they say. You can either pasteurize the straw using a hot water method, which basically you're dunking it in hot water on a pot in your kitchen. I am not permitted to do that. Okay. Or you can do the lime bath method, which is where you're using that the hydrated lime. Don't use dolomite lime. You need hydrated lime. Okay. And what you do is you're just soaking it in cold water for a certain amount of time. Then you take the straw, put it in a mesh bag, and hang it outside to dry so that the volume of that decreases the weight by about 50%. That's usually meaning that the straw's wet, but not dripping wet, because you don't want dripping wet. And then you take your spawn in your bag, mix it into the straw, and bob you go. And then what you need now, of course, is you're doing part of the work, and you place the bucket in a warm, nice closet, and let the spawn permeate the entire straw. And then the next step that you have is you allow, once again, you're going to, and I've done this, it's fun, and I usually put duct tape over the holes after I've drilled them. And then I have 2, 3, and then you, once again, same thing. And once again, you start getting these. And this is really easy to do with your oyster mushrooms in particular, and they look really funky growing out. In fact, one of my buckets, I had my 2 flushes, so I stuck it outside, forgot about it, and boy, I had a 3rd flush. It come in the fall. I went, cool. Okay. And what do you do with all of this substrate when they're finished? You put it in your compost. Okay. So that's indoors. So you can typically, when you get started, and this is the way I started, is I started with the shotgun container, because having a plate on the kitchen with a bag over it, my son said, forget it, I'm going to be cooking here, I don't want this next to me. So I went directly to that shotgun chamber and made it out of my laundry basket, wrapped plastic around it, put the holes in, and it worked just fine. Okay. And then
growing it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's got a sort of a sweet fermenting smell. If it smells funky, the mushrooms are funky. I've had that happen. In fact, I was going to bring one tonight, and I lifted and I went, oh boy, I'm not bringing that here tonight. Okay, so yeah, you will have failures as you learn, guaranteed. Okay, it's like growing seeds indoors. You will have problems. That's how we learn from them. Okay. But no, the smell, I keep mine in my office, for Pete's sakes. So if I can tolerate it in the office, in fact, I don't even notice that. So you can take it outdoors, and this is where I'm going now. You could create a mushroom bed, and literally you are growing it on the ground. So what you do is, rather than the oysters and things like that, now you're looking for what they call the primary decomposers. And so these could be your wine caps, it can be your oysters as well, and it could be your rishis as well. It could be all those guys. And what we're doing is we are growing outdoors according to that cycle. So it's not as fast. So indoors you can get mushrooms like chung, 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 chung. Outdoors you're waiting for those conditions to appear. And typically as well, the spawn takes longer to go through the mushroom bed to start to fruit. So you're looking at preparing it one season, maybe next year you get it, maybe the year after. So we're talking a long-term proposition. So all you need, cardboard, substrates, spawn grown in a sawdust, and you're off to the races. So now we're getting even cheaper, so to speak. And what you do, this is where I had mine under the spruce, nothing happened, so I've reestablished my mushroom bed under a deciduous tree, put the cardboard down on the bottom. And that's meant to try and cut down all of the volunteer spores, is all it is. Then you put down some wood chips, and you put down some spawn, more wood chips, more spawn, and then I topped it off with some straw. That's it. How are we going to keep it going? Is you water it just like you would your veggie bed. And it's to me, yeah, this is easy, you know. You just need time. And some people will grow them in more enclosed areas because they want to reduce the potential for contamination. So I've seen them grown in, you know, the big white totes for water. Somebody sawed it off, and that was a perfect environment. So you can do that if you want. So literally, we're looking for the right climatic conditions for it to start to sprout. I'm getting back into seeds, germinate, to trigger the fruiting. So once again, we're waiting for the right conditions. Spring and fall is typically when you're going to see the fruiting happen. You want to make sure that your moisture is constant and you're monitoring for pests and diseases, and harvest them when they're ready. So once again, got to positively ID them, because make sure that we haven't got a look-alike growing in there. Do allow the beds to rest. Just like a perennial plant, mushrooms need to rest to regrow the energy, etc., go through the cycle again. All right. What I'm planning to do is once a year add a little extra substrate, so I'm constantly adding some food into the mix. This is an experiment for me, okay? You can also grow them on wood. And when you get really into it and you've got a nice acreage, or you can cut down all the trees in your garden if you wish to. What you do is you're growing, once again, your primary decomposers. Shiitake, lion's mane, reishi are often grown right on the logs. You don't need a big space. I'm being facetious in some respects, but what you do is you're literally having these logs be eaten by the fungi before I'll start to sprout. So it is very much a 2-year thing beforehand. So this is just a little corner inside, and what you have to do is you get hardwood that's freshly cut. So if you know a handy arborist, you get logs about 3 to 4 feet long, and you stack them. Doesn't have to be like this, but some people will have, they'll literally just lean them up against fence boards, all sorts of things, different ways. You want them off the ground typically, and you fill the holes with the spawn. So you can see how you drill the holes in, and then you just shovel the spawn in. Then you plug it up with some wax. I like beeswax because it's a natural thing and it will slowly degrade. And then you wait. And you wait and you wait and you wait. Okay? I am nowhere near getting into this, but visiting that mushroom place was fascinating to see them. You can grow them in stacks. So literally they take the wood and then they fill the spawn on top and put another log on top. You can grow stacks as well. All sorts of different techniques that you can get if you're getting into this type of thing. Okay.
One of the things that I found in the wild when we go walks after rain,
Yeah.
it's usually a race between us and the bugs. Who's going to get the mushrooms first? So you might want to mention the race.
They are coming. Absolute, that's coming. Because there is never anything that's a free lunch, right? You're right, except for the bugs. All right, so when we are getting started, these are the 4 groups that we typically see available for us. Oyster mushrooms by far. They have pink, pearl, blue, yellow, all sorts of different varieties of the oyster mushrooms. These are the ones that are the most plentiful and available to us. Lion's mane is also dead easy. I have grown lion's mane very successfully. Shiitake, a little much more challenging. That's because normally it likes to be on wood as opposed to in our homes, but it can be done. And wine caps, ditto. Okay. You'll sometimes see wine caps called by this, Strophharia. So the books will just say the botanical name as opposed to the common name of wine cap. And you get, what the heck is a strops, whatever it is, and it's a wine cap. But these are the ones that we typically will see. And in fact, the Basil Ranch created a wedding cake with pink oysters as the decorations. for a couple, which was kind of neat. Oh, you were mentioning. Indoors, it's our flies that are the biggest pests, bar none. If you are a gardener, indoors, you typically have fungus gnats. Who's got fungus gnats in their house? Somebody doesn't? How did you manage it? Oh, all right. Fungus gnat. Teeny tiny little dude. This guy. You can see them, and you know it's a fungus gnat because they like flying in front of your face because they're attracted to the CO2. They will go into potting soil. A fruit fly, which is typically not going after our mushrooms indoor, but a fruit fly you'll find after our fruits. If you leave your fruit on the counter, you'll see them buzzing around the fruit or the compost bin. Those are the two that we often have in our homes. But there can also be the very teeny little seasid fly, and basically you only just see the little guys, the little larvae. They like feeding in the substrate. So use your yellow stickies to make sure that, just to monitor what's happening, okay? I guess I must have too much of my outdoors in my indoors because I typically always have fungus gnats no matter what I do. And we bring them into the homes, by the way, with our poinsettias and our Easter lilies and all that kind of stuff. So that's often how they come indoors. Or you open your door and a few fly in, okay? They will go after the substrate, and they will also go on the developing mushrooms like this. And so you'll just see on the mushrooms themselves these little black specks. Okay, so how are we going to get rid of them? The yellow stickies is typically what I do. And so when I'm growing indoors, I'm always lifting the lid, inspecting. If something flies out, I got a problem, okay? If my yellow sticky has got more than one every day or so, then I got a problem. Do I continue? Usually I do, but the other thing you can do is if you're suspecting it, when you pick your mushrooms, you just wash them in a salt water bath. And if you've got a fly in there and the gills, typically they go inside, up inside, then they'll float right out. So if you pick your broccoli and you wash it so that the aphids can come out, so you don't eat the aphids, that's what you do with mushrooms if you have a fungus gnat problem. I'm so used to these days washing my produce, not for the pesticide removal, but to make sure there aren't bugs. It's actually, well, yeah, that's usually what I tell my son, except when he found the slug inside the lettuce. Yeah, so yeah, do wash your mushrooms even though you've grown them indoors in good conditions, because you never know, right? Okay, so indoors we've got the flies to worry about, but if you've got good hygiene, typically we don't have a big problem. Even I don't have that problem. Outdoors, slugs love them. Snails do, except we don't really have snails in Alberta. All their assorted flies and other stuff that will lay their eggs on them, plus rodents, and including our fence. Do you guys have the black squirrel yet?
I have one for the first time I saw it in the tree.
Yes, they love these guys. So they are protein. They are a good food source. So it is the race. So, you know, it is an organism, eat the mushroom world out there. So yeah, that is one of the issues of outdoor growing. And so the answer to that is grow more, so that there's some for those guys and some for you. Share. Okay, so just to finish off, and going back to the beginning, our fungi kingdom is under threat, just like the insects, just like any other organism except for human beings. So in order to protect, to conserve, to regenerate them, and the word is regenerative these days, it's not sustainable. Okay, so what does sustainable mean? It means to sustain what we have. And I'm very big into regenerative gardening these days. The argument is that we are not seeking to sustain what we have already. We are in a world that's still degenerating. We're still depleting our resources. We have to regenerate them, then we can hopefully sustain them at some point. So that's the new word. And organic is out totally. It's so manipulated that the word has lost its meaning to us. What is organic gardening? Organic, we are organic. Chemicals are organic. Everything is organic. So what is organic? And so for the that's it. Organic versus synthesized, right? Yeah. But manipulating us, right, with the word, right? Anyway, divert. So what we can do, we can eliminate all of those synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. And by the way, if you can, also eliminate the organic ones that we can make ourselves. Garlic spray can be just as destructive as Roundup, for instance, okay? The only difference is that organic pesticides typically do not destroy the fungi itself underground. Do practice no-till gardening, and if you ever want to talk on no-till gardening, I would love to give one. So the idea is that we do the least amount of harm by digging in our soil. So we want to get our gardens and our soil to the point where we no longer need to dig. So the only time we need to dig is if we're excavating the potatoes and the carrots, or we are planting a new perennial plant. Okay, you're frowning.
Like the solid clay.
Ah.
I know it's movement.
It makes,
dug up.
yeah.
It's not as good a soil as whereas I just laid
Yeah.
stuff on top.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. I am totally converted. So please do use your compost, either stuff you make yourselves or the ones or you buy. Do you have the green bin system here? So the bad stuff goes in the green bin, the good stuff stays in your garden, right? To make your own compost, if you can. Do encourage those wild areas in your own garden, either having snags, dead trees, or creating just a messy area. Increase the diversity of the flora and the fauna, and then the fungi will appear as well. Reduce the size of your lawn if possible, and or increase its biodiversity, and Mike will be talking about that. And I'm fully on board with him on that one. And leave the plants standing in the winter months if you can. I am a lazy gardener, and I leave the plants standing in the spring, and the new plants just grow up through them. And be an advocate for our fungi. Okay. In the wild, we want to learn how to pick the fungi properly. We don't want to harvest anything in the wild that's at the button stage. You want to wait till they're fully open. Do always leave some behind. And make sure that we leave areas undisturbed by leaving dead wood behind. So in other words, don't scavenge for deadfall if we can. And be an advocate. We need to be an advocate for all three of those F's in our world. And here's a bunch of resources. I'm big into books, as you know. I write the darn things, so I should be. These are the two that I own. No, three that I own. The first little guy that I showed you, Mycelium Running, and Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Absolutely fantastic books to own. From the library, and then this guy here, okay? This is my back pocket. From the library, I got Mushrooms Mushrooms of Western Canada. This is a keying book. This is a full-scale field reference book where you're keying it. So for the average person wanting to ID in the field, like me, I go, and I go back to this guy. Pictures, exactly. If you loved teeming with microbes, teeming with nutrients, Jeff Lowenfeld has written Teeming with Fungi as well. Heavy, heavy science book. Okay, fascinating stuff. Do I read it? Have I read it? Yes, but back to front. Okay, I dip into it. Oh, by the way, it's small. Look at that. I just got this today. This is the Small Farm Canada Annual Seed Guide. And this, for the first time, they have a section on sourcing mushrooms. It's cool. This one's how to grow from scratch. This one is mycorrhizal fungi. So it's a lot of the environmental stuff that's involved in here, a little bit of cultivating. There's a film out called Fantastic Fungi. Have you seen it? I'm going to see it. This is the companion book, okay? And it's written by Paul Stamets. Yeah, who wrote? What did he write? Paul Stamets. Who? What? Yeah. Okay. This guy. Yeah. Okay. He's the editor of this. And there's lots and lots of new books coming in. Mycelium Mayhem is a fun one. And we cannot forget our children. I do work at the Mount Royal University Child Care Centre. We are growing mushrooms this year. And so we have mushroom lullaby, fungus, and mushroom rain, okay? And sometimes you learn more from a book like this than you do from the big fancy ones, okay? Oh, has he? I'm going to have to look for that. Yeah, because yes, yeah, it's kind of cool. It's just like a cool thing.
And he goes on to say how fungus are probably going to be for our plastics in our ocean, and that they revolutionary.
They are. The amount in terms of food, we're going to eat more of them. It's unreal. It really is. The more you dig, the more you learn. The more you want to learn, the more you dig. Yeah, it's fascinating. And so thank you very much for coming with me on my journey. My journey usually when I tackle anything is I make 6 mistakes so that you can only make 3. All right, so I'm getting there quite nicely. And so thank you. You can please contact me if you need to. Email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, not so much. And if you're ever interested in any of the books that Cheryl and I write, we have 6 out right now. The last time I came to see you guys, they were going to be coming out that March, right? Well, now we have 6 out, and number 7 and 8 are coming out in March. These are the 2 newest ones. So if you were interested, I'd love you to have those. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the questions throughout. Thank you. So any other further questions or any
I
other
don't see any questions
questions
online.
And do you have anything you want to say, Sue, or anything like
Does
that?
anyone have any?
Okay. I do want to mention that on March 6th at the Shaughnessy Library, so it's close to Cottage, I'm going to be doing a talk on prepare now for spring. So basically, if we think spring's coming in March, what we can, should, would love to do in terms of the world of preparing now. Also, the Hort Society has their Think Spring Symposium on this weekend, and it's online, if that's something that interests you. What else can we think about? Don't forget February 22nd with Krista, February 22nd?
Yes,
Yeah.
February 22nd. We'll be learning more about growing vegetables here in the foothills. So
Perfect.
we always need the help, don't we? It's here, yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
perfect.
same kind of format, so.
Perfect. Great. So great. Lovely to see you guys again. It's lovely to be with you guys again. We did online. Yeah. So long may we not have another pandemic. We've lived through one. That's the
Yeah.
only time we need to do it on our bucket list, right?
Where do you get the grow kits from?
I often get my kits from Vicky at Basil Ranch. If you go to Fungi Aikido, they have a number of, they don't make the kits anymore, they supply the spawn, and they have a number of resources of places that are growing them as well. Akudo, Akudo, Megan and Tanya. So in other words, where do I get my materials from? People I know. Okay, so if there's somebody local here doing that, that's where I would recommend going. But Vicky at the Basil Ranch is a great supplier. Down in Inglewood.
Still no online questions, so.
All right, well,
I guess
that's
I'm glad that you mentioned that you've got an 80% chance of eating the right mushrooms, and only some of them will make you sick.
yes.
We have a cottage up in northern Saskatchewan, and one time we just filled the picnic table with a variety of mushrooms. And I have to say, I had 2 books.
Yeah.
And I couldn't identify them, and I didn't have the guts to try.
I know.
I ate mushrooms that were growing in my lawn last
Spring?
spring after all the rain.
Yeah.
And they were delicious, and I didn't get sick.
Yep. There we go. And actually, yeah. And I was at Land of Dreams last summer, and one of the guys who used to grow mushrooms in Cameroon, because that's where he's from, he said, if you look at mushrooms, a mushroom stand, and the worms are eating it, then they're edible.
Oh, that's good to know, because mine did have worms too.
Okay. So I looked at Patrick and I said, are you going to pick not the wormy ones, but are you going to pick those and eat them? And he said, yes. I said, okay, if you're here next Saturday, then I know you were right.
This is what they say in my mushroom book. You can eat any mushroom once.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes you're lucky and you get to eat them more. But no, we should not fear our fungi. We just need to learn them and we need to respect them. Absolutely. Just like anything else, right? Okay, super.
I shall keep in mind the no-dig gardening.
Yes.
I've been reading about it a lot.
Yes.
It's great if you're lazy. It's perfect, right?
Like,
You know?
I have an old gravel bed that all
Yeah.
I've done is let the weeds come up and go down and come
Yeah.
up and go down, and I've put like maybe like a half an inch.
Yes.
I have like 8 different perennials
Yeah.
now. They're all good. They don't need
Yeah.
water. They're doing fantastic.
Beautiful.
And the one bed that I dug up is the one that I constantly have to water because everything wilts.
How do you get your compost into the soil if you don't dig it in?
Put it on top, and the elements and the worms will do it for you. My theory on life, now that I'm not 20 anymore, is that gardening should not be work.
How does Mother Nature feed their soil?
Everything falls on top.
Because soil's actually
How do you
layers.
plant your carrots?
Oh, it's, and it's interesting because we are products of a cultural norm, that's a good word, that's sort of European based. Totally different soils, totally everything else, right? And trying to unlearn our natural inclinations is hard. I am the same. My granddad was a potato farmer, for Pete's sakes. I dig. So it takes a lot for me not to dig.
So when the soil is so hard that your carrots go down
No,
and
and
then go
sideways, that's different. So what you do, yeah, like this, it's a process, right?
Yeah.
So
3 years. and now
3
they're,
years.
Like, this long.
Yeah, it's not, and it's a
And
process
like
of,
this much compost, this much leaves.
yes, and it's a process of decreasing intervention is what it is. So there you go.
I better live.
I'm going to live to 94, not 64. Remember the Beatles song, now that you're 64, right? I want to be 94. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
so
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us online.
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
But you wouldn't share like your slide deck or as a PDF.
Oh, I see.
Totally get it.
So then I said, you know, I just create some records. Just because I think you're dull. Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna get it.
Someone's leaving.
You know, I'm thinking this is the first time.
Well,
Anyway, thank you. Hi, I'm wonderful.
Bill. Just before Christmas.
How's your chaos?
Do you want me to go? Green Gate.
And a black cap.
Builders did a whole bunch of different houses.
Okay.
Yeah, that question.
It's one of the smallest. I'll have to interrogate. This is the part that's going to take. Already on there. Just, distribution list or whatever. I'm especially interested in this vegetable session coming up.